What is my again?
I don't know.
But stop, don't start. I didn't want to be here all night.
I don't know.
Okay, so today we are going to have a conversation, and that conversation is what?
About a tainted testimony.
Yeah, so we can dive more into that.
So this really came out of a sermon that my lovely wife would have preached a couple Sundays
Lovely.
ago. Lovely wife, yes. My
Interesting.
lovely wife would have preached a couple of Sundays ago. And I must admit, I sat there listening to her delivering the word, and I sat with a smile. One, yes, because she's my wife and she's beautiful, but also because I was so proud to hear her. And I'm not saying proud like, but that's my wife, so just proud. I mean, the word that she delivered to the church was such an on-time word. It came from God, and she was really talking about the fact that we are in a time where God is expecting us as a people to move and to go and to do certain things that He's commanded us to do, but there are things that keep us hindered. There are things that keep us bound. There are things that stop us from moving forward. And there were about maybe 5 or 6 things that she listed that God had said to her was keeping the church bound, the church of Jesus Christ. And I think that we want to discuss those, have some conversations around those to maybe spur your thoughts or encourage you to think or evaluate where you are in your own journey with Christ. And, maybe encourage you as well to move and to go as well. So one of the areas, as I said, was a tainted testimony. So I suppose we should just start here without even diving into what you said. When you heard a tainted testimony, what immediately came to your mind, even before you got scripture and everything to back it up? When you heard a tainted testimony, when God said that, what came to your mind?
Well, first of all, it was a tough sermon to deliver. As you know, I would have talked to you about it and debated on if I really wanted to say it, because it's a hard conversation for people to hear.
Yeah.
We usually like to hear blessings and God is going to bless you, God is going to do this, whatever the case may be.
So see.
But when it comes to character issues or messages where God wants to convict a person so that they can turn away from whatever it is, then it's less amens and all of these things. But not that I am preaching for amens, but when it's hard to, that when you have to go and deliver a tough message,
Yeah.
that that people might be like, okay, well, he's not coming back, or she's not coming back. But when God gave me the word, I knew I had to preach it, and that came to me strongly in terms of a tainted testimony. And I think the definition that I would have given was a contaminated witness, I think. And why it was a burden for me, because like every time I turn on social media nowadays, is like you're seeing a lot of tainted witnesses, contaminated witnesses. And I find that it's like it's a lot, and that because we have a lot of conversations about it, and it's not that we are perfect. It's not about being perfect people, but is that your witness is contaminated, and therefore you can't go and preach the gospel to people, because the first thing that they're going to say is, but you can't speak to me. How dare you speak to me when I know that you were in the club with me yesterday, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think that
from what we see, what are your thoughts on it?
I think that I love the definition that you used. A contaminated witness. I love that word, contaminated, even more so than tainted. I like that word, contaminated, because it really speaks to what we're seeing. When you think of water, so literally when you give the definition, contaminated witness, my mind immediately started to think of like water. And I thought of when you have water that is pure and it is clear, it is just clean, nothing is in the water whatsoever, that's pure water. But the minute that you add anything into that water, the water begins immediately, most times, to, I don't want to say reflect, but whatever has been added to the water immediately starts to show in the water. So if the water was clear and blood jumps into the water, immediately it starts to get that reddish, brownish kind of color. There's something, whatever comes into it affects the water one time. And so when you said contaminated witness, I thought about the fact that as we see online now, there's so many people who I think they were pure. I believe with all of my heart that they were pure, but somewhere along the line, they love Jesus. They were pure, but somewhere along the line, a little dye has gone into the water. A little sand has gone into the water. A little rock has gone into the water. And when these things get into the water, they themselves bring whatever was upon them. So the rock might get in, but then the dirt that was in the rock is also going to get into the water. You know, so when you said a contaminated witness, that's just where my mind immediately went. And I thought about what we see right now. We see a lot of contamination, a lot of, you know, just it was pure, but it's no longer pure. It is being affected by something.
So stick up in right there. What is the problem? Why don't you think the water is pure anymore? What happened to cause the water to be, I mean, we can't speak for everybody, I know, but from what you are seeing, and I mean, because it's a boldness, I mean, like back then, before, like when you would have sinned or whatever, when you would have done, generally, when all of us would have done our things before, like we tried to hide it, it's like nobody is interested in hiding anything anymore. It's like, oh, I'm in church worshiping on Sunday, but hey, here I am on this fete, or here I am in this costume, and I am like, wow, like you are literally bold. So you are telling me then that I have to accept the fact that you have one foot in and one foot out. So because it is that this church wants this talent, then I am accepting that from you, that behavior from you, because I want you to play drums, I want you to sing, I want you to play the keyboard, I want you to teach Sunday school, whatever, and you are contaminating the testimony of God. Because if you are doing all of these things, then, as I said, why should I listen to you? Even not only unsaved, but the fact that you have other people looking at you in your Christian circle, or younger people that are coming behind you, the people that are the same age as you, whoever, people, new converts, whatever, they are looking at you. So they may be struggling with something, and the fact that you are doing all of these things, it makes them walk back out.
I think that's so profound what you're saying. And to answer your question, what do I think is causing it? I'm not even sure. I think that in general, the truth of the matter is there's an onslaught of the enemy on the church, and therefore an onslaught of the enemy on the testimony of the believer, because your testimony will be tested. I mean, it literally can't be a testimony if it has not been tested. And so it will be tested. It is an accepted part of this journey that your testimony is going to be tested. But I think what is happening is that the tests are coming so strategically, and it's because obviously the enemy is fully aware of the areas in which we struggle and the things that we would have struggled with, because long before we fall, he has already noticed the things that we were constantly looking at on social media. He was looking at the things that we were listening to. He was already watching the things that we were scrolling for and looking at, because
we have no boundaries. But that's another conversation. But we lack boundaries. Go ahead, continue.
But it's because at the end of the day, the enemy is not omnipresent, so he cannot know everything and be everywhere and understand everything or know our thoughts and all of those things. But what he absolutely can do is audit our behavior. He can watch the things that we are doing and watch the things that we are listening to.
As he said, he knows what we would have struggled with in the past, familiar spirits, all of these things.
So because he knows these things, he's able to put these things and present these things to us. And then because you correctly use that word boundaries, which we'll probably talk about some other time, but then because that does not exist and we don't have the right boundaries and the accountability that is necessary to walk forward, sooner or later, the contamination happens. Sooner or later, we find ourselves slipping. And it might be just one slip this year or one slip today, then it's two slips tomorrow. And it just becomes now a slippery slope that we find ourselves going down. And before we know it, we are completely contaminated. But what is really unfortunate is that what happens when we become contaminated, if we're not careful, we start to contaminate others as well.
Wow, yeah.
Because the decisions that we make then now, the person that's seeing us, that's what you were talking about, that there's the other person that may be struggling now, and they think because they see us, they think it's okay. What we're actually doing is contaminating them now. Because if you take contaminated water and pour it into pure water, guess what's going to happen to the water that was once pure? That too is going to become contaminated.
Wow.
But maybe, and you can respond to this, do you think a part of this is because we're in this new age and this new space where I am my own man and is my own woman, and nobody can't tell me nothing was right in my eyes. I am a god unto myself, and therefore whatever I think is right to me is right. Do you think that that is part of what is driving and causing the callousness that we see, the boldness that we see? Do you think it's driven by that, or is there anything else? What do you think?
I think that we forget that God has called us to be holy, to be righteous, to be pure, to be all of these things. And we just, I don't know, I think Christianity has become so, I'm trying to find a word. Our words are trying to explain. Like, we focus so much on production and having the best worship team. Not saying that these things are wrong, but we focus on all of these things, and then we have another set that we just focus on, the tongues and all of these other things. But we forget that God requires these things. God requires holiness, and so we believe that we cannot live like the world. We have to be set. No, I'm not telling you that you have to be boring and you have to dress boring and you have to do all of these. Because you are not telling you that you have to wear these things all over your feet and cover all these things. But God has called us to live holy lives. And we are, so as you said, callous, and we in this generation, self-love and becoming this person and all of these other things. And I think we are just straying, bit, as you said earlier, bit by bit by bit by bit away from what God has said in His Word. And it's a very dangerous thing, because it's like we are trying to test the waters and see how much we can do without completely walking away. But the more that you test and test, you're not going to end up, the only place that you're going to end up is away from God. Like, it makes no sense. It's either you're standing with God and for God, or you are not. There's no in between. There's the kingdom of darkness and there's the kingdom of light. You have to choose. And honestly, this is not the time for us to be sitting on the fence. And I mean, we're talking about seasoned Christians as well, and it's and I told you, it's hurtful for me to see and to hear, especially when you have unsaved, as we were talking about today. And I was telling you, somebody would have told me, an unsafe person, they don't believe in God and all of this. And they told me the amount of times that they would have encountered pastors and deaconess and all of these other people that claim that they are Christians, and then they are not living right. And it's like, oh, well, that is not a good example for me. So she's like, you can't be talking to me and you're living like this. So it's like, we want to shout and we want to raise our hands and we want to do all of these things, but what about your character? You see, your character is contaminated. So you can get up there and you can preach well, and you can teach well, and you can worship well, and you can do all of these things, but your character is nasty. And I think that is the biggest thing. Like, your character is nasty, and other people see, unsafe people see, other Christians see, whatever the case may be. And it's hard for you, as I keep saying, for you to then come and tell others about Jesus, because you're on a slippery slope to what? Nothingness? I don't know.
It's really sad, and it's disappointing. And I think in the midst of what we're trying to do right now in this conversation is sounding an alarm to everyone, and to let you know, that God is really saying to you, don't contaminate your testimony. Don't allow anything to taint your testimony.
Yeah.
Don't allow it. You have to be so careful, because whether you think that it's affecting you or not, it's not just affecting you, it's affecting other people as well.
That you influence.
It's affecting other people. And I think that we have to start back. We have to, as a people, we have to return to the place where we start to think about what effects are our choices having on other people. We may think it's only us, because in the moment we're selfishly thinking about us.
Just want to do what I want to do.
In time to come, in the future, there are people that are being affected by this, by your choices and your actions. It's a proven fact that we intentionally influence at least 5 people, and we unintentionally influence at least another 5 more. Meaning there are 5 people that right now, your choices, whether you want to admit it or not, deep down inside your heart that the choices that you are making right now are affecting them, whether it be a child or a family member or a close friend. I don't know, but the choices are affecting them. But then there are 5 people who unintentionally, you may not even be aware of it, but they're watching you. They're looking at your social media. They're listening to your conversations. They're watching the things you share and the things that you post, the things that you're saying. They're watching these things, and it is having an impact on them. And it's either drawing them to Jesus, or it is pushing them further and further away from him because of the example that they see. I think we're just trying to sound an alarm. That's why I said in the beginning, listen
Alarms.
to the message and ignore the messenger. It doesn't have to be us, it could be somebody else. But God is sounding a clarion call right now to his church and saying we have got to be very aware of our testimony. And we cannot continue. Clarion, it is a loud call. It is something that is
that's for me.
Bellowing.
That's for me.
I know.
Yeah, no, that's for me.
It is something that is bellowing out there. Something that cannot be ignored. It is clear. It is an important call that God is sending out to his church, and he's saying we need to watch our testimony. We cannot contaminate it anymore. We are contaminating others. They say, like how they say that unforgiveness is like drinking poison by expecting somebody else to die. Well, this tainted testimony, what we're actually doing is we're bleeding on everybody else. They say that, I feel like I heard that statement sometime, that if you don't deal basically with your wounds, you will bleed on people who did not hurt you. But what is happening right now is because you're not dealing with your testimony, you're bleeding on other people and affecting their testimony. And we need to be really, really careful. I didn't tell you that it's easy, or I didn't tell you that we're expecting anybody to be perfect. I'm certainly not suggesting that we are perfect in any way and that we've got it all together and so we're on some high horse looking down, judging anyone. Absolutely not. We also have to stay very careful and very mindful that we do not taint our testimony in any way, because people are watching us. People are being impacted by the decisions that we make. And we just want to encourage you to know that the same thing is happening for you. People are looking at you. People are observing, and they're making their decisions based on the choices that you make. So please be careful. Please be careful, because at the end of the day, God is requiring holiness. As my wife correctly said, God is requiring holiness. And that could be a whole next conversation on holiness and what that means. But God requires it. God requires it. We cannot think that we can live unholy and then still expect God to accept and ignore the choices that we make. It wouldn't be fair for him to do that at all. And it certainly wouldn't advance his kingdom if he were if he were to compromise his standards in the life that we live. So please hear that clarion call, hear that important call, hear that, that word that has gone out. Don't contaminate your testimony. Be mindful of what you're allowing into your water. Be mindful. Be mindful. All the dirt and the sediment and the mud and everything, be very mindful. The clay, be mindful of what you're allowing into your water, because it's damaging the quality of your water. It's damaging the quality of your water. You wouldn't go and drink muddy water from a swamp,
or like water from down north, and you still make a lot of best water. So like that type of water.
Yeah.
That type of water.
You wouldn't do it. So therefore.
But going back to something that you said, you said that about we influence, like that's the old brain testimony, I literally couldn't remember. But we influence others like unintentionally, and that is literally true. Like I remember, like that I post the sunflower icon all of the time. And sometimes I think we underestimate how much influence we may have on other people, and that is so true. But I remember, like I put up the icon all the time, and because it means something to me. And over the years putting it up, like I just recognize that, like I see a lot of people on my contacts or whatever, they use the icon a lot, and I was like, oh wow, like I know that's me, and not in a way of but I know that comes from when you continuously do something, you will just see somebody else do it, and sometimes they may not even realize that they were influenced. So like just to say that, yeah, we influence people and we may not know. So it is important that we live, as you said, the right way.
Yeah. It's like music. You listen to music and without even thinking about it, the song don't leave you. You hear a song and the song stays. It just happens. We are influencing people. I was trying to say, yeah, I've seen so many people now with these sunflower, and I'm like, oh look. Or like how this whole year I've been telling about the Merry Christmas. Now there's so many people that just know that when I'm leaving a place or I'm going, I can say Merry Christmas, and they know I'm going to say it. I've been saying it the entire year. People watch, whether you think it
good
or not. People are watching. I think there was a quote. I suppose we could probably end with this quote. There was a quote I read one time, and it said that for many people, we are the only Bible that they will ever read. Some people will never read a physical Bible, but they will read our lives. We are the only Bible that some people will read. So we really need to preach the gospel, and only if absolutely necessary should we use words. So I think that's our challenge to everybody. It's our challenge to ourselves as well. Just keep understanding this is not a high horse. This is not us trying to tell anybody, oh, you're wrong and we're better than you and you're a sinner and you're going to hell. No. The beautiful thing about God is that no matter how contaminated our testimony is, you know what the beautiful thing, thank you, Holy Spirit. You know what's the beautiful thing about this? That no matter how contaminated the water is, do you know that if you keep pouring in enough clear water, it will inevitably wash away all of the contamination? If you got blood in water and then you just keep pouring clear water into it, eventually, it may not happen immediately, but eventually the clean water will once again overpower that which was contaminated, and it will get rid of all that is contaminated, and once again you'll have clear water. It's the same thing for you. It doesn't matter, and I don't want it to end this conversation without making that very clear, that this is not a condemnation or a lash or to tell you that you're wrong and you're going to hell and you're unsavable and there's no chance for you for redemption. I want you to hear the end of what I just said as well.
Yeah. The most important
part is that God is so gracious and so loving and so merciful that if you're alive right now and you can hear this, there's an opportunity for your water to become clear again. And I don't want you to think that your water has to stay dirty. I don't care how dirty it is. It will not, and it does not have to stay dirty forever unless you want it to and allow it to. It is possible for the water to be clear again. And so if you want for your water to be clear again, there's a conversation you need to have with a loving Father who is right there willing with a whole jug, a whole bucket, a whole, I don't know if to call it a tank, a water tank full, a river, an ocean. There's a Father right there with all of the clear water that you could ever possibly need. And he's more than willing to pour it in you and then let it flow out of you so that others will now once again be able to receive from a pure and a clear testimony rather than one that has been contaminated. So I don't want you to miss that. And I want you to hear that. And I also think that that is also God's word for you. And so we pray that God will guide you, that he will challenge you if he needs to, that he will convict if he needs to. But even after conviction, that you will accept his free offer of grace. You will accept
Amen.
the water that he's more than willing to pour. I think of the woman at the well. This will become a sermon, so I'm not going to preach a sermon.
So I was about to say that, like preachers say the closing and then the closing, and
so this will not become
this is the last closing
a sermon. So what I will say instead is, if you want proof of what I've just said, John chapter 4 is right there. You can go and read it. The Gospel of St. John chapter 4. Go read a story of a woman with a contaminated testimony, who didn't even know that she had a testimony in one way or the other, but one who accepted some clear water, and it just absolutely totally transformed her life. So guys, God bless you. And remember, don't taint your testimony, don't contaminate it, and let the clear water of God continue to flow out of you. Anything you want to say, love? All right. Well, then that's the end of it for today. That's the end of this conversation. But we pray that it will spark something in you as well, and you can now use it to have conversations with yourself, with your spouse, with your family, with your friends, or with God, more importantly, as well. And may He use what we may have shared to speak to you and to guide you as you continue. God bless.